Educating, informing, serving. Fact TV, keeping government honest.
Today is Wednesday, September 1st, the first meeting for the Select Board, of which we will have a second one. It's the second Tuesday this month, so you can get back on the schedule of 2 meetings a month. We are in the lower theater. There's a Zoom connection. Unfortunately, our large screen is not working, so we're running through the laptop computer by the manager. So please be patient with us. We'll get there. So I'd like to call this meeting to order. First item of business is to approve the minutes of August 5th, 2021. Anybody had it in their packet to get a chance to look at it?
I'll move that we approve the minutes of August, what was it, 21?
Motion's made. Do we hear a second?
I second.
Motion's made and seconded to approve the minutes. Are there any errors, omissions, corrections noted? Hearing none. All those in favor would say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Sue?
Aye. Aye.
Minutes are approved. Thank you, Sue.
Yep.
Additions to the agenda for routine maintenance of routine administrative matters and/or pressing matters that will require ratification at a future meeting.
No, nothing to add.
See nothing, hear nothing, speak nothing. No, that doesn't go. Public comment on items not on the agenda. I believe Laurel Green has a little speech concocted there. Laurel,
Thank
you
you.
on?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yep,
Mm-hmm.
go for it.
Good. I'm Laurel Green, Sustainable Rockingham. I just wanted to report the good news that the hazard mitigation studies series that we conducted went very well. We had an introduction meeting and a progress report at the end, and in between we held 14 meetings representing the 14 hazards related to climate change that are listed in the state hazard mitigation plan. And just kind of the quick by the numbers, there were 14 local people who came to the various meetings. We met 16 times for a total of about 24 hours. And we drafted 31 possible proposed action steps for hazard mitigation in our town, with the understanding that behind all of the hazards now, we really have to look at climate change. And today we had a very productive meeting with some of the officials from town, as well as some people who had come to the residents who had come to the meetings. And after about 2 hours, we got partway down the list. We still have more to do, and we'll meet again next week. My understanding is that meeting is open and available to anyone who is interested in the hazard mitigation work that's being undertaken by town. Very exciting process, and would invite anyone on the select board to join us. And just wanted to say a little shout out to Bonnie North, who did come to one of the hazard meetings. So thank you so much for everyone's efforts, and thank you for the town. A great collaboration between people in town and the town officials we've been working with. Very exciting process, with hopes that we can get a hazard mitigation plan in an expedited fashion, thanks to the work of Alyssa Sabetto at Wyndham Regional. We hope to have that into the state by the end of October, which is very fast. Usually these take at least a year, and the good collaborative effort is making it come along really fast. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
Thank you.
Hearing none, we'll move on to the manager's report.
All right, so thank you. So just a couple updates since we met last. I have talked to Elon City about one of those, I'm not going to pronounce this thing right. It's EVOLIS, I think. It's EVOLIS, the portable radar speed signs. So we're in the process of getting that hopefully delivered soon. And then we had talked about deployment. We've got a couple of requests from 2 different areas so far out in the town that have already asked for some speed, to put it out in their neighborhoods to see what kind of data we get. And then we had talked about potentially, in part of our budget process, talking about if we wanted to look at contracting or some other opportunities to do speed enforcement related to the deployment. So that'll be coming as we do our budget conversations later on through the year. Some other information, I know Sue had asked previously about the status of our Act 250 permit for our current at the pit. So I just got a proposed permit from the state. This would come into effect in September. They have to go through a public, basically you have to put it online, and the notice has to be put into a opportunity for the public to come and comment. But if seeing that nobody potentially has any issues, then we should have our permit, as Sue had requested previously, about the portions of the pit that she had asked about. So that is ongoing. You do have an item on tonight, so we won't talk about the lease, because that'll be a separate item. Since we last met, we got some more news about our coronavirus local fiscal recovery funding. So that's another acronym that you'll hear a lot about. So that's CLFRF. If you remember, Vermont's a little different than other states because we don't have the same structure of county government that other states do. And there was a direct distribution of this type of funding for counties. And so in the Vermont case, now those distributions are coming directly to the towns and villages. So there'll be a second distribution of this funding. It'll be broken up into two separate payment tranches. So we're going to get an additional, the first round of funding we talked about was $154,000. The second round of funding is going to be an additional $286,000. So we'll be getting another $143,400 roughly in additional funding this year, and then another $143,000 again next year. So the total right now from this source of funding is about $441,500. Wow. So we've put together separate budget accounts for this revenue. So we've segregated it from our other general fund revenues. And as you can imagine, there's different requirements for how this money needs to be spent and how it needs to be tracked. So as we go forward and we get more guidance on that, we'll talk about that as a board, about things that you may or may not want to do with that money. So just wanted to give you a heads up that that's in the pipeline. With that being said, the other thing that we did want to talk about as well this evening, and there was a lot of concern, and I know a couple of board members have reached out to me about cybersecurity. And New Hampshire's had a unfortunate occurrence where a community has lost potentially up to $2.5 million based on a scam that was sort of perpetuated on them by these automatic cash, transfers, these ACH transfers. So I think there was concern about what types of protections have we built in. We have a whole host of various phishing and third-party and other types of network security built into our system. The thing I think that we're going to do that was recommended through, and this is a financial practice that quite frankly I think makes sense anyway, is under our financial controls, when we're doing a electronic transfer, especially to a third party, what they really want you to be able to do is have a phone number for verification. So that way, if you do get these requests like they did get in New Hampshire, you would at least then have the ability to call a phone number and say, I'm going to transfer an ACH to you. I want to make sure that you're not a bogus or some sort of other problem. Most of ours go through People's Bank, and they go directly from State Bond Bank to us and back and forth. However, we want to make sure that we have that extra level of protection, so that's something that we're going to start to implement as part of our financial practices as well. The only other area where we do have some vulnerability, and it's something we're working on, is we do have some older computers in this building that still run Windows 7. They're not up to Windows 10. They're in the lister's office, and we've talked about having the listers come in September, and part of our presentation will probably be some of the concerns about upgrades and some other things in that office and some of the other things that are happening in there. So I know we had discussed that sort of in a vague way at a previous meeting. I think we'll try to maybe ask them to come and do a presentation to the full board, maybe at the September 14th meeting. And we can talk about that there as well. The final thing I wanted to do is Gary was here, and Gary's always busy, as you can imagine. He had some good news for us. Recently, the Opera House, and through Gary's hard work, had applied for some additional funding to help support an upgrade of our lighting system, to digitize our lights so that we have a better control of our house lights and emergency lights, as well as provide some upgrades for theater type lighting. So if we have shows or other types of live events, you have the ability to do some things digitally and control lighting in various ways that I think makes the theater, it's a nice enhancement to the theater that we currently have. Our current system is really out of date. You have to use a floppy disk to basically run back and forth and do changes to the current lighting. So it's not very effective. It's also a little bit of a safety concern because if we did have an emergency, it's a little difficult sometimes to raise the house lights and get the emergency lights and get everything up so that people can exit the building quickly. So it sort of has a dual impact. We did just get notification that we're getting about a $20,000 or $21,000 state grant for that. There'll be some matching funds required for that. We'll work through the Opera House committee, and I think at some point Charlie was going to reach out. I don't know if he reached out to
He
you
did.
and Sue.
Susan and I met with him a couple days ago.
Oh, you did?
Online.
Okay.
Yep.
So that's ongoing, as well as we were going to be bringing forward to you an update to the red lease. I wanted to make sure that you had an opportunity to talk with Charlie and see if there's any other issues or concerns. And then we'll also give you an update on just how things are going in terms of attendance, revenues, some projections, and maybe just a little bit of conversation about the theater, and we can also incorporate some of these capital improvements. We've been having some issues with the roof. I think we finally have identified the leak. There's a pipe that has an area that is going, we traced it down, and so we're getting that sealed. And I think the pipe is cracked, and I think that's part of where we're getting the water penetrating. We've also got the roof drains on a scheduled cleaning, so they're being cleaned every week to 10 days. So we shouldn't have a problem with debris clogging the roof drains. I think the problem right now that we're seeing is that one cracked pipe. So we've got our fingers crossed that that'll solve this problem. All this is really doing is pointing out to the fact that when we talk about budget, we talk about capital as we get into our discussions. The roof on this building is a problem. It's going to need some new roofing, and those are pretty expensive as we get into that conversation. So we'll have to talk about that, about a roof replacement as we go forward. But we're hoping to at least eliminate that problem. Then we can patch the areas where you've seen some plaster and some other problems in the Opera House itself. Finally, Gary's been again busy, and as he always is, putting together other opportunities for grants, and there was one that he just recently finished, and I thought maybe it would be important for the board to just get some background on this grant. It's an exciting opportunity. If we get a chance to go forward with this, I think it'll be a great upgrade to the community. So Gary, you want to talk about the 2021 VORIC grants?
So with Vermont's success with the Vermont Outdoor Recreation Program and that grant, the legislature put in about 10 times. There's, let's see, I think $5 million this year, and minimum grants are $50,000, and they really want communities to beef up their outdoor recreation programs. And they additionally, the Forest Parks and Recreation added an URSA grant. So the URSA grant is specifically for the construction of trails. So the two grants work hand in hand. The VOREC grant, continuing on the development of the Bellows Falls Historic Riverfront Park and Trail System. That trail is built out. There's some kiosks going up, and part of the initial plans were also included riverfront access. So what this year's VORIC application does, so we haven't submitted an application. Both grant programs asked for a letter of interest. So we described programs, rough budget, letter of interest, basically a really short form. If they invite us to apply, we'll be submitting an application and coming to the board with that application. So the current VORIC grant would provide for a ramp for river access, a dock in the river, racks and sheds for canoes, kayaks, paddleboard rentals, and for the storage of those. And would also provide, I don't have some of that here, let's see. Would provide funding for programming. So working with partners, which the Connecticut River Conservancy has partners that work on paddling programs up and down the river. They're also submitting a grant for this connectivity of paddling connections up and down the Connecticut River, and we're a participating partner on their application. But the programming this would be is you could rent the whatever paddle sport that you're into, rent the equipment here, and take short trips to Route 123, where there's a river access on Route 12 on the New Hampshire side, or further trips to where the what is it? It's the Westmoreland, the old Cheshire County Prison. Or trips to Putney where the river access is there, or to Brattleboro. And other partners would provide that trip back, so that you're renting the equipment, paddling one way, and then getting a ride back. And so for paddling, really tough to paddle against the river. So these types of programs that are being instituted up and down the river really make that river type of recreation possible and convenient and easy with the rental equipment. You don't have to haul these up and down the river. So that's one application. And then the URSA application continues the trail that starts behind the grist mill at the riverfront and builds it out around the wastewater treatment plant and up through to Liberty Mill and along Liberty Mill to the end of an easement that was granted for this trail. So those are two programs that we're really hoping are competitive and that we get invited to make application to. The URSA grant that builds that trail, so it provides bricks and mortar type. So the trail construction would also include funding for wayfinding signage. So different groups and programs, BIFTA, the Chamber, are working on wayfinding programs. Elijah's involved in that a lot. This would provide funds to actually buy and install the signage. And additionally, part of the Rockingham rec area, building out that area with the pump track, this would provide some funds to expand the use of the warming hut, to have rentals of bikes for the pump track and equipment to use the trails that are by the ski tow, like snowshoes or cross-country skis. So it would provide that facility expansion funds for the warming hut.
So Gary, I got a question.
Yeah.
Where is this dock and stuff going to be?
Yeah, so part of the grant is for the, so the VORIC pays for SOV costs if it's not the only, so it will do design, engineering, and equipment. So the first part of the grant would be assessing the appropriate spots in that riverfront park for the river access and the architectural design for the access to the river. So ramp, dock, So that would be included in the work of the grant funding.
About the only places where the steps are already
Yeah, that could be.
that go down to the,
Yeah.
because we consider that a kayak launch now, you know.
Yes. Yeah. So this would expand on that.
Uh-huh. Now, when you set all this up, you're gonna need staffing there too.
Yeah.
Somebody's
So
gotta rent these boats and all that stuff.
yeah. So the VORIC grant. So those are some good details. So. So the partners in this program are the Historical Society, the Saxons River Valley Trail Initiative, BIFTA, the BF Community Bike Project, Wyndham Regional Commission has been involved, the Wyndham County Trails Alliance, RAMP, the Chamber, Sustainable Valley Group, the Bald Hill Committee of the Wyndham Hill Pinnacle Association, and our rec department. So they're all working together on different aspects of these programs. And what a lot of the communities do with these, with the rental programs is the equipment is on a rack and life jackets and paddles are locked up there. And then businesses in the community, downtown merchants, and this is a way to help hook visitors that are using this stuff into the downtown. They have schedules, calendars, keys. So you partner with the downtown businesses, and they can collect the rental money and schedule the rentals. And so there's also some funds. Again, it can't be standalone, but if it's a piece of the whole project, for some administrator funding. So in this application, there includes a request for funds for the administrative work would be visiting the businesses, identifying who would partner with them. There's some pieces left over from last year's VORIC application, like that we weren't able to do because of businesses being closed with COVID, but it was for the businesses in Bellows Falls to offer incentives if you use the trails. So some of the administrative staff is to work with the businesses building out those programs, setting up the rental partnerships with one or more businesses in the village. But all of those programs need to build out. But the beauty of the VORIC grant is it won't fund just something like that, but if it's part of a whole package and vision and program, it will fund the administrative help, the programming help to build it out, the design, architectural help. It will purchase equipment like some kayaks and paddle boards. And the minimum grant amount is $50,000. So they are expecting large grant applications. So if we are selected as competitive, we are applying for enough to cover all of those items. Would be
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I know the Historical Society, we don't even have money to pay somebody to mow the lawn, you know?
exactly, yeah. So that's why the request here is for the programming and the administrative support, and has a broad base of partners to not to actually do the footwork in this, but to help do the planning in their meetings and the coordinating between groups and authorizing building a ramp and a dock down there, and authorizing to have the programming, the paddles and life rafts on Historical Society property, that sort of thing.
What about insurance on that?
Yeah, so
I'm not trying to throw, you know.
No, but you gotta cover all the bases.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, those are good questions, and insurance would have to be part of it. And so part of developing the program is who's the owner, who's the operator, where does the ownership and liability lie? And so part of partnering with the Connecticut River Conservancy and their I forget what the program's called, but it is something with the word paddle in it, and the pathways for that whole Connecticut River stretch is that they have they do this a lot. They have the templates, they have the liability pieces in place, and hence why we partner with them instead of trying to reinvent all of those wheels.
Okay, great. Sounds like you've done your homework on that.
Yeah, working on it.
Yeah, very good. Thank you.
So we're hopeful that if we are selected, I think it's another nice enhancement, another opportunity to bring people into that area, which, needs to, we're trying to draw people to some of the waterfront, and some of the planning that we're doing, we're looking at ways to enhance the canal and the river, and some of our, really our attributes that are, make Bellows Falls and our area kind of unique, and hopefully will draw some people and give us some recreational opportunities as well. So these are the grants that, again, we've got our fingers crossed. We've done pretty well so far. Every time I announce one of these things, everybody thinks it's just submit a piece of paper and you get money. It's all competitive process. So when we announce these awards, we feel pretty good that, hard work goes into this, and it's nice to see, we're getting some rewards for some of that hard work. So this would be a nice program if we get it.
Going back to the signs, traffic signs, what are
Yep.
we doing with Saxon River? I know that they were concerned about the fact that we're buying a couple more signs for use in Rockingham, but are we gonna be putting posts out there and probably educating them on how they can move their signs around? Or are we gonna have to take that on, or?
I think the idea here is, let's get our program up and running. Let's see what kind of results we're getting, and then I think we'll work with them about how they
Okay.
might want to maybe do some
Just in
things.
case they ask, that's, I'm
Right.
just curious.
I mean, this is a pilot, so it's really,
Yeah.
it's so early in the process, and people have already started to inquire, well, who makes the determination where it goes? And I said, well, right now it's whoever contacts us. We really haven't gone out and formalized a program yet. And we've already had 2 areas that have already expressed an interest, so we'll see how it goes.
Is Saxon's River one of the areas that's expressed interest?
Well, we had the original folks down in Lower Bartonsville. They were the first one, and then I had a secondary group that and I have to. It is in Saxon's River. I just can't, off the top of my head, remember exactly where it was.
I think the southern approach, the west-west road, is a sort of a speeding corridor. I'm pretty sure at the last trustees meeting or one before.
I have an email from somebody upstairs, so
Amy
I've been
possibly.
just keeping track of them. And as
Good.
the stuff comes in, I'm sure I'll present it at another board meeting, and then we'll probably put together more of a formal process as we go forward. So we'll see how it goes.
Okay, we all set to move on? All right, let's go to the agenda, and the first item is the Rockingham Board of Liquor Commissioners for a special event permit on the 27th of September. Association of Private Railroad Cars is coming through, and they're gonna stop, and they have 15 private rail cars. They're gonna start in Chicago, is that right? And come eastward, and good luck with them. But you want to expound a little bit on that, and then we'll move to get the motion.
Sure. So this is an association that's been around for a long time, and their membership has special trips that they do. So each of these 15 cars are owned by someone, and they fill it up. There's eight sleeping units in each car, and they fill it up with members of their association and friends of theirs. And this is ideally will become an annual autumn. Let's see, what did they call it?
Explorer.
Annual Autumn Explorer Fall Foliage Scenic Railroad Adventure. And so they're coming into Bellows Falls. Of course, some of the most beautiful track for that trip is between Rutland and Bellows Falls. And that's where they'll be coming through. And so the idea is that they're going to arrive at 4:00 on a Monday, and we want to make sure that there's, besides the scenic foliage, that when they get here, they want to see Bellows Falls and come to see all the assets and attributes we have. And Monday night, evening, there's not a lot open here. So BIFTA, the Chamber, the Historical Society, the town have worked together to have some activities at the train station to welcome them, but then move them on to, a lot of the merchants are remaining open till 7:00 for them. There's some tours being set up. The grist mill and the Historical Society will be open. There's the self-guided neighborhood tours that Historical Society member, I think Doug Maffei, is going to tour people on. Walter's going to tour people on the industrial history, and Frank's going to be in the grist mill, having that open. And then, so we have a program that has all of the stores that are going to be open. restaurants on a Monday night is tough, so we have some folks that have menus they can pre-order, that meals will be delivered to the train station for before they do the tours, and smoking bowls will be out there for people who don't pre-order, want to have availability of food at the time. And so part of that welcoming is a local vineyard, Vermont Vines. Our BIFTA director works for them as well, and is going to be providing samples with the availability to sell wine in bottles also. And there'll be some of the merchants, whether some are stake open, some that aren't, and some that are going to have some booths in the train station with things to look at as well, and some of our local artists' paintings. The artist incubator at 33 Bridge is going to be open with some displays. At any rate, so this permit is for the wine sales at the train station as part of the welcoming when they arrive at 4 o'clock on Monday, September 27th.
Okay, there's a motion on the paper in your packet if someone wants to make that motion.
I'll make that motion that we approve. Do I have to read it, Peter?
Yeah, just read, yeah.
Okay. Motion to approve the special event permit for Vermont Vines on the River LLC.
We'll hear a second.
I second that.
Motion is made and seconded to approve the grant for, the liquor license for Vermont Vines on the River LLC. All those in favor would say aye.
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 Motion passes. Do you have an original somewhere, Gary? I don't have any. I got a copy in my bag of it. Okay,
And
while
Peter, I'd
Gary's
just like to
finding
say
that.
I think this is a really exciting opportunity to showcase our town, and I would really encourage business owners in town to participate, and also the public to participate, get involved as well, and come visit the downtown that evening.
Yeah, it sounds really good. I mean,
Mhm.
we want them to keep coming.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think it'd be
great.
interesting just to see the cars. just
Yeah.
to see
Yeah.
these rail cars, I
Yeah,
think.
Right,
that would
wine
okay.
tasting wouldn't be so bad either, you know?
Right. So,
Yeah, we definitely want to be good ambassadors for Rockingham.
Yes.
Okay, do you have a copy there somewhere, Gary? We can use yours. Second item there is the consideration, or accept the town facilities VCDP grant, and I'll read the grant agreement resolution. Whereas the town of Rockingham has applied for funding under the Vermont Community Development Program as provided for in 10 VSA Chapter 29 and has received an award of funds under said provisions, and whereas the Agency of Commerce and Community Development has tendered a grant agreement number 07110-IG-2020 Route 22 to this municipality for said funding. Now therefore be it resolved as follows, that the legislative body of the municipality accepts and agrees to the terms and conditions of said grant agreement. That Gary Fox, Development Director, is hereby designated as a person with overall administrative responsibility for the VCDP activities related to this grant agreement, and that Scott Pickup, Municipal Manager, who is either the Chief Executive Officer, CEO, as defined by 10 BSA 683, parentheses 8, or as the Town Manager, the City Manager, or the Town Administrator hereby designated as the authorizing official to execute the grant agreement and other such documents as may be necessary to secure these funds. So that being said and read, there is a small motion if someone wants to read it at the bottom of the page. Just please move the PM resolution.
I move that the PM-1 resolution be approved by the select board.
Do I hear a
I'll second that.
Motion's made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing, seeing none. All those in favor would say aye.
Wait, Peter, do we have to designate who signs it or no?
No, it's
Oh,
just
we're
one
all
spot.
signing
Well,
it. We're
just
all
the
signing
select
it.
board
Okay.
chair signs and the
Okay.
town clerk signs, and then the other one, everybody has to sign the grant agreement.
Okay, all right. Aye.
Did everybody vote?
Aye.
I think. Okay.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. I'll sign the application for the special event, and then everybody will get a chance to sign the grant resolution for the VCTP grant. Okay, you got 'em? All right. And we'll get this one started, get this one going around. Everybody can sign that one. Okay. Consideration of an appointment to the Fire Equipment Committee. I have offered my services to take this position if nobody else wants it. I'm familiar with most of the people on the fire department and everything, and I've had some interaction with them about things going on there, so if someone wants to make the
I
motion-
move that Peter Golick be appointed to the Fire Equipment Committee.
I second that motion.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded to appoint Peter Golick as the select board appointment to the Fire Equipment Committee. Any further discussion? Hearing none, seeing none, all those in favor would say aye.
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 Motion passes. I guess I.
Aye.
Thank you, Sue. Consideration of lease for solar array on Route 103, Novus.
So if you,
Has everyone had a chance to read that lease agreement? I noticed
yeah,
the
sent it
numbers
through the
changed a
attorney,
little
and
bit.
Kuda's made some updates to it, and this is now the final copy. It's gone through a couple revisions. As you remember, the last time we met, we did we had to do a administrative action in order for Novus to be able to start their publication for their Public Utilities Commission process. So that was what you had approved at your August meeting. This is now a full lease agreement. So this would be the terms of their build out and the terms of their use of the space if you approve it going forward. Basically, a couple of highlights from this. You know, it's only the lease of the roughly, it's a little under 3 acres, 2.8 acres of space. There is an initial payment at the start of construction for $50,000, and then if you look, you'll see on the back of page 2, there's a continuing yearly lease payment up through years of 2025. And if you go beyond the 25 years, then it's still to be determined. So that'll be up to select boards and managers well past all of us. So be that as it may, the rest of the terms are pretty much as we had discussed previously, so not much had really changed.
Scott,
Okay, well,
you'll-
we need a motion to approve, to get it on the table, and in that motion should include the authorization, to authorize Scott to sign the.
All right, you open for discussion?
And
The hazardous substances, the fact that this has been cleared by Act 250, the spot that's going to be used, the parcel, that means that it has already been tested for hazardous substances or not?
I mean, where we are, the ground that they are going to be leasing from us is basically gone through the Act 250 process. There is nothing there except gravel and reclaimed dirt. So there isn't any concern, and they're not bringing in anything specifically from their installation that's hazardous. They're basically not allowed to.
All right, yeah, it just says that we warrant that we have no knowledge of any chemical or waste, et cetera, et cetera. So there's no history that we know of that would have deposited any hazardous substances there.
Nope.
Okay.
so-
Only if, this is below where the Bartonsville Bridge parts were stored, I'm assuming?
Yeah.
Okay, because that would be, I think, the only site was where the bridge was stored. There was creosote in that, but I think that's further up in the pit, closer to the south entrance.
Closer to that main gate, yes.
Yep.
Yeah, I think this is far away from that.
The main gate, yeah. It's not, they weren't stored on the area where the solar pit was going to go.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so we need a motion to accept or approve the lease agreement and name Scott as the signing agent.
I so move, or do you want me to say the whole
Nope,
thing?
that'll work for me if you want to move it.
All right, I move it.
We-
I'll second that.
Motion made and seconded to approve the lease agreement with Novus for the solar energy program up on the Rockingham Town Pit, and authorize the manager to sign said documents. Any further discussion? All those in favor would say aye.
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 All those opposed, nay.
Aye.
Motion carried. Okay, number 5, moving right along here. Request for Assistance Emergency Watershed Protection Program, USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service. And I'll let Scott lead on this one.
So I've attached some maps and some pictures and some information for you about the facility that we're talking about here. If you look at the bottom of Imtech Drive, and you can see where the Chroma property is, you can see at the corner of their property, there's a retention pond, and then there's also, if you follow sort of that red line, that sort of follows a ravine that ultimately is a steep slope, and that runs down and ultimately goes into the river at some point. The issue that's been occurring there is they've been having some erosion issues as these heavy rains have started to become more frequent, and there's a concern that there's a threat to that corner of their property. So we've been working with Gary, and we've been working with Wyndham Regional, and we're looking at a comprehensive sort of stormwater approach here. There's multiple individual stormwater permits, like from the mover facility, from the Sonex facility, from the storage, and from the gas station on the corner, for example. But there's still some issues with how quickly that water is eroding that hillside and potentially threatening their property. So this is a major concern. Obviously, Chroma is an important part of the community. We want to try to work with them. So what this program would essentially do is provide a source of funding potentially through the USDA, which would then help us with some protection measures that might be able to alleviate this concern and maybe come up with some other solutions that might help us sort of rechannel this water or find other ways so that this property is not threatened. There's been also, since we've had the July storm, in that general vicinity, there's been some washouts on the railroad as well. So we've been working with Vermont Rail and some other folks, because there's some concern just in general about what's happening in that whole area, as well as EPA's been working in the area because they've been getting complaints of oil in the water in and around Herrick's Cove. So EPA has been doing some field work and just initial work about what the source of that might be. So all of these things are sort of happening not necessarily in concert, but all in that concentrated area. What I'm asking for today is that we at least start the process to execute a potential agreement if we're able to qualify for assistance to the program. And it is a 75% USDA, 25% project match, and we'd be looking at some stream bank protection and some other work that would be helpful, I think, to help alleviate this condition. Chroma has also started hiring engineers and working on some other aspects of helping with the stormwater in and around some of the parking lots, and we're also working on doing some dye testing to see if there are other connections or other concerns that we might also address as we're doing some of this other work. So we're not quite sure yet what the scope of this might be. I just wanted to bring this to the board's attention, get your permission to go ahead and start this process, and we'll keep you in the loop as this goes forward. At this point, we're still sort of in a preliminary stage, but I think it's significant, and it's at a point where I think we wanted to try to at least get that process started and hopefully come up with some solutions that we don't see any further loss of that area. as that slope erodes, it's potentially not only creating some concerns for their detention pond, but also potentially if that area is lost, then you can see how close that is to the corner of their building. And there's some concerns about the entire, the structural integrity. So it's a fairly significant concern, and I think it's something I think that this was at least a way for us to go forward. And if there's other sources of funds, if we get a federal declaration and we're able to use FEMA monies potentially for either hazard mitigation or other types of programs, we'll certainly try to apply for that as well. But the FEMA designation process has dragged on a little bit here. It's been a little slow since the July storm. I'm kind of surprised we still haven't heard anything to date. So I felt it was important that we try to get going on this other avenue to see what we can do on this particular situation. The reason why we have to do it as a governmental jurisdiction is the land is actually owned by the Brattleboro, BAD, Brattle, Jesus, I'm going to chew on this one, the Brattleboro Area Development Corporation. So they own the land, and the building obviously is owned by Chroma. So as a political subdivision, that's why we can apply for this money. If it was a privately owned piece of property, then they would have to go through other types of solutions.
So this money that you're applying for now is just to have someone come and study the situation. It's not really to get going and get out the shovels and fix it, right?
I think the initial stages, we've got to get some engineers to give us some solutions, potential solutions, and then I think there'll be a second piece of this as to the actual stream. What would the stream bank protection or other recommendations actually be, and how much would those cost? That'll be a second piece of this.
There's a lot of impervious surface there with all those parking lots.
There
I
is.
think that's probably
It's contributing. And
contributing a lot.
A lot of impervious.
I wonder if this is just an aside. It might be a good idea to sort of put in our zoning or something to use oyster shell or gravel and not, blacktop for large parking lots.
Well, there's lots of ways to look at the stormwater piece of this, and we'll take a look at the water quality. Like I said, there's already some investigation going on in that general area because of some concerns about oil in and around the Herrick's Cove area. So there's a host of things going on. There was about a 300 or 400 yard washout of the railroad after the last July storm, and talking to Vermont in that general vicinity as well. So there's a whole host of things going on, all related to stormwater, rain, and trying to figure out what the best approach is.
Between the flat roofs and the parking lots, I mean,
Massive runoff.
it's massive.
Sure.
The water needs to be captured.
Yep.
I mean, you could put pipes in the ground and everything, but real heavy storm, and your pipes are gonna go sliding in the mud. You need to.
Yeah, part of it is to make sure that we're capturing the runoff appropriately and that everybody's stormwater plans for their properties are adequate. And then secondarily, we've got to figure out what is this problem that's creating this erosion and concern about that area.
Scott, in the photograph, the aerial photograph, it looks on the sort of the eastern end of the parking lot there. Is that a big washed out area right there?
Well, we've been doing some, and it's funny, you can see there is some stuff that's washing, when you look at some of the other photos, there's stuff that's going into the water. Where it's coming from that ridge line, which is a little bit, and then I think some of it might be running through there too. That's part of what the dye testing we're going to try to figure out too, is where things are actually going. So, and a lot of this is, there's real elevation changes here too, right? Doesn't really,
Darby Hill is right up there. Yeah.
Yeah, the mapping doesn't really give it a real sense of where your elevations, because it's pretty significant.
Yeah, and in terms of Bonnie's point, is it a state or is it a local? What in terms of stormwater permitting and the runoff and all this impervious surface? who's responsible for what?
Well, the state's working with us on the stormwater issues. So that's Department of Conservation. They've been involved in this. Wyndham Regional's been involved in this. Obviously, we've had our own folks involved, so.
Do we have any jurisdiction in terms of design, telling people how they can build their parking lots?
A lot of these predated some of the more recent updates to stormwater regulations, so there are some issues about that, but we might be able, like I said, to go back and do some mitigation. And certainly if there's other sources or things that, you know, obviously there are things happening here that are not being properly controlled or captured, or so we've got some field work to do, as well as then coming up with some mitigation measures. But what I do need is just your permission to at least begin to explore the, you know, this emergency watershed protection program. And then I will come back to you at some point with what we've found, what these potential recommendations are, and where we think sources of funding might be.
And in terms of the oil, Herrick's Cove is such an ecological jewel. I'm really concerned about that oil. Will they let us know? Will they tell you when?
Yeah, I've been in touch with the EPA. They've been out and done some field work. They've done some drone work. I talked to the EPA folks about a week ago. They still don't have any updated information. As soon as they do, I'll report it back to the board.
Thanks.
So.
Just as a little history, that used to be an old lumber yard back in the 50s. Hannafin lumber, that whole area.
Really?
And there is nothing but sawdust and probably decaying lumber stuff that's under there. When they started the Sonex building, that gully you see off to the left there in this picture,
Yep.
that was already started to erode at some point or other.
Oh.
And that joins that other gully that comes in just to the, I would say the west of the Sonex, of the Chroma building. There's two gullies here that converge in the back of,
And
they
they're
end
pretty
up going
severe.
down.
I mean, they're
Oh.
And
pretty,
they are steep. I'm
Yes.
telling you, they've got to be at least 80 feet deep. I don't know how we're gonna, you know, it's like trying to work off of the Highlands area, that project there. If you ever looked at you can see that settling pond down there by the railroad track.
Yep.
And I can't believe they can't find some sort of a culvert that goes under that track that allows it to escape into the river.
I
doesn't make
can't
any
understand it
sense,
either.
but
That's part of why we got Vermont Rail involved
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
There's
But-
got to
but
be a
that's
lot of.
and they may, you know, that oil may be coming from an old oil or fuel tank that's been in there in the ground. That
I hate to
from
speculate.
Hannafins.
It
Yeah,
could be
you're
all
right.
sorts of things. I mean,
Could be
yeah,
anything.
right?
Right.
You know.
But
But anyway, just,
Okay,
just
well,
a
thank you.
matter of
it's a
just-
host
That's
of
helpful.
issues, and we're hoping we can find some solutions. So.
Yeah.
Sue, go ahead.
Peter, don't we also have to get the power dam involved in this somehow?
Yes.
I mean, and
Yeah.
the FERC licensing process that's going on, I mean, some of this stuff can get into that.
We did talk to Quebec Hydro just basically saying we're working on this issue, and they do own quite a bit of property, obviously, in and around that, you know, that portion. So we'll have to work with them as well.
Okay, so you need a motion to authorize yourself to investigate and apply for any funding and eventually bring that
Through the Emergency
application back.
Watershed Protection Program,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, we need a motion. Or did somebody just want to move what I said?
I move pretty much what Peter said, that we approve. We approve.
What he said.
And then we need a
That thing,
second.
Yeah, that thing, yeah, okay.
Anyway,
Stop doing this.
I'll second that, whatever he said.
whatever he said.
Okay,
Thank you.
the motion's been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Questions? Hearing none, all those in favor would say aye.
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 All those opposed, nay.
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion carries. And finally, we get to a financial update.
So we had a finance committee meeting earlier this week. We were working on some updated trial balance information with Cynthia from Nemrick. Peter was at the meeting. So maybe Peter can give you just an update. We didn't produce the financials that were at the meeting because Cynthia still did not want to have those come out until she ran them by the auditor, which will be the next step. But I thought maybe Peter could just give an update to the board, just so that everybody has a sense of what's happening and maybe some things about what we're doing going forward.
Yeah, as far as the general fund and the highway fund, which are the biggest funds that we look at, they seem to be doing pretty well. I think our fund balance is going to end up in a pretty favorable position going forward into this year. Just looking at what we've saved, and as an example would be the theater, where we had budgeted last year $300,000, and we've only spent like 100. So right there, you're going to get 200 grand. That's going to, less what we've already appropriated to carry this year to operate that and see where we end up for a few months here. But the highway department also has a fairly large savings in it. So we are pretty well set financially. There are still some issues with the payrolls, the reconciliation. They got to get those straightened out. They found some problems with the W-2s and tax reports, so that's been handled and on the way. So as far as it goes, both the town and the village actually are in fairly good shape. There's no issues there's some issues bond payments on the village side that need to be basically water and sewer, because that's where the big money is. That needs to be straightened out, and they're working on that with the bond bank and anybody else they can find that knows anything about it. So that's being updated, and that's one of the reasons why they didn't want to give us a report, because they haven't got that cleared up yet. But other than that, they're just moving along. Maybe by the end of October, we were given a tentative time that we might be able to get a nice clean thing. The thing that I picked up on too was that our tax sales, and Scott and I have talked about it, and I think we mentioned it at one point at the board. I know Sue brought it up, that we need to think about that, going forward, and do something either in October and get that started, because it takes about three to 4 months to get all the background paperwork to that. There's $462,000 of delinquent taxes, number one, plus another 130 grand of penalties and interest to add to that. So there's quite a sum, and we haven't had a tax sale in several years. So I think we need to get into that and go forward, but that'll come to the board eventually. So that's something to keep on the back of your mind there.
Now, if we have a tax sale, is the Liberty Mill gonna go
That's
up?
one of them that's on there, but although there is some activity that somebody, I think Gary said something to me about, someone is either leasing or renting part of that, and they were talking about doing an indoor track of some sort, a bicycle track.
Randy. From,
Yeah, so something's happening there. So I don't know if that will eventually get to that. They may buy it for what the taxes are on it, and
Right, that's just what I was wondering.
that's a cheap way to buy the property.
If anybody is
So.
interested in it, maybe.
Yeah. But
them
there's
know
there's
that
there's
we're
issues
gonna
with
do
the
that.
building that
Right.
need to be corrected. I mean, I understand there's holes in the floors and everything else because
yeah,
it's just
my
been
God,
gone.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it's open to the weather now. I mean, there's no windows in it and everything's not boarded up.
Well,
so.
that guy bought, the print shop there.
Yeah,
So, if he's
So.
interested in Liberty Mill, that would be
Yeah.
great. He's done a beautiful job on the old.
well, if that other grant that Gary's gone for, the Boric grant comes through and eventually opens up that area some more,
Yeah.
that might introduce some interest in getting
Right.
that.
I mean, he
moving
might
too,
really
so.
want it,
So,
Yeah,
so.
it'd be wonderful to have somebody do something.
Scott may have a few things to add to it, but.
So I think there's a couple pieces to this. I think, first of all, on some of the W-2 and tax information, I think there was some setup problems, which was it wasn't any kind of malfeasance or misfeasance. It was just not setting up some of their deductions properly. So some people did not get their withholdings correctly. So we had to go back on 4 people, and they've all been notified, so they're well aware. And we'll have to open up and refile the 941s for some of those quarters. A couple people were set up improperly. For example, in my case, I don't take the health insurance, I take a payment. The payment was it was set up as a taxable fringe, which was not the way it was supposed to be set up. So I was paying taxes on the money, but then the money wasn't actually then going into my check. So just things like that. So there was issues with some of the way that the I guess previous setups on some of our personnel in the finance department created some of these errors. So those are being corrected. The balances of our revolving loan fund loans, which is another area that we had talked about, is being reconciled and updated. Some of them hadn't been properly recorded. So payments had been made. Some of the loans had actually been completed, but they were still showing as open. So those things are being completed and properly recorded, so that, again, they aren't impacting our bottom line, but they're just cleaning up the books so that things are correct. Some of the items that were voted on in town meeting that were articles had not been properly recorded. And this was an issue that had come up in previous discussions with the board. And so the concern has always been, and I think Peter can probably elaborate on things like when we were putting the $50,000 additional monies away to help support construction projects, like capital projects like for the bridge, or when we put the additional $40,000 for unsafe buildings. And I think we did, those types of things. It wasn't being recorded in the proper places. And so they weren't showing up in the balance sheet. So it was generating incorrect positions in terms of our overall financial position. So there's a couple pages of that type of correction, some of which Peter's gone through, some of which we've already identified that we're trying to finalize, so that when we put out the June 30th, 2020 statements, all of that will be corrected. Everything will be up to date. Those balances will then be accurate. We've already, we're still posting stuff for the current fiscal year, but that way then going forward, we'll be more confident that when I give you these monthly updates, unless we've coded an expense incorrectly or recorded a revenue incorrectly, you should feel confident that the data in there will be accurate. So that's kind of it's been a little painstaking. It's been a little slower than we anticipated. But I think we're making progress. And I think if there's any good news out of all this, and it's a little hard to find good news, we haven't found any areas where we had any acts of malfeasance or any missing monies or any problems where we were like, oh my goodness, we got a problem here. It's just a question of getting things in their correct places, cleaning up some of the issues about how the software was operating for some of the basic things, and then getting those reports back to you so that you're confident going forward that you've got the correct information. So we're not quite there. Again, I only get Cynthia 2 days a week, and it's a little time consuming. This is our second finance committee meeting. We're hopefully going to have one more, and then I think we should have our 2020 pretty much done and audited, and the auditor's concurrence, and then we'll be able to then give you that and 21 year to date. So that's the goal. I don't think I
once
missed
they get to
anything.
2020, because you got to have a foundation to start from, then
Right.
going forward, the rest of it's going to be fairly clean and without too many questions. And as Scott mentioned, some of those bonds and stuff, like if we appropriated money from town meeting to go to a certain project, they didn't get recorded properly, or they got stuck somewhere and nobody can figure out how they got there to. And so now we're going forward, we're probably going to set those up on a separate line item so we can track expenses
Yeah.
versus.
We've been
the
creating
money.
accounts.
So it's going to be a little easier for people to follow it rather than.
Right. And posting a lot of journal entries so that there's an audit trail, because again, we have to do all
Right.
this. It all has to go through audit. So that's why it's a little painstaking. But we're getting there.
So Peter,
Yeah.
I just like to thank you, Scott and Cynthia, for the amount of time you're putting into this. This is a real puzzle.
Jigs from the village.
Yeah.
Jigs
Jigs
is on the
going too?
village side. There's
Yeah.
4 of us in there
Yeah.
beating her up. She got frustrated at one point because we kept peppering her questions. But
Well, we're impatient like everybody else. And so I think it's slow go at
Yeah.
times. We had all thought this was going to go faster. Unfortunately, we've just found that it's not, it just takes time.
like,
So-
you get this page done, you turn that over and, oh Christ, there's another one there. You
I
gotta start
know.
looking
Right.
at, it just compounds and it just takes time. to
I
go
can't
through this stuff.
imagine. I
So,
can't imagine doing
but-
it,
No,
actually.
it would drive me
It's a
nuts.
nightmare when you
But
get
we
into it.
haven't found any indication that we've eroded our financial position. So I think, again, if there's any good news, I think as Peter alluded to, we haven't found any like, oh my goodness, our fund balance is wildly
Yeah, no,
inaccurate or
that's-
we're
No.
missing a
I
large.
feel
Well, we got hacked and lost a couple $1 million.
Right,
Well,
yeah,
that's
like-
the worst
yeah,
of
no.
all worlds. Good
Peterborough,
God.
yeah.
Yeah, that would be
No,
the worst
that's-
of any.
no, we're not anywhere near there, I can tell you. The village, you got some issues, but that's a bond thing. They got a $988,000 negative on one in the water, in the sewer, but on the other side in the water, there's $1.2 million debit, so they think some substance got switched over, and
don't
there's
think-
just
Oh,
stuff
God.
like that. that
Just
drives you
recording
crazy.
and
But
right.
then you've got to go back and track back how the
Yeah, you have
bond
to find
agreements
it.
worked. And
Right.
Yeah.
and then you got the state, and you got the engineering company that did the work. Oh, so it's just a nightmare when you start
Right.
looking at it.
Peter, do we have any liabilities from former employees? I know there's some lawsuits that are resting. Would those be covered by insurance if we were to lose those cases?
Probably most of them, I would say, VLCT would, because they're working in conjunction with Scott
Okay.
and that to straighten that out. And I know there's 3 or 4 of them out there, and some of them are village. I think we only got 2, I think, in the town.
Yeah, I don't think we have anything right now.
Because
that
the only,
that
I
are-
think, is that you're trying to straighten out the Mike Hines
Correct.
situation.
Right.
And most of them are dealing with the police department and the
Oh.
village. So it's nothing
Not us.
on our end that we got too much of a
Everything
hurry.
that's
Okay.
out there under current litigation is under our umbrella, and there has been no coverage concerns. So it's within our current insurances and coverages.
Okay.
I don't think we have any exposure outside of that. I mean, there are times when you can, but right now, knock on wood, we don't have that. So
And our former finance director, that is all squared away?
she's still on our severance because we are still actually, I need her on some current litigation, so she's still as part of her payout, but we
Wow.
have used some of, we have to go back and contact her periodically just when we get stuck with how did this get here or how did we get there? So we're still doing a little bit of that work as well.
So is she being paid her old salary still? And
Yeah,
that's
we had
been-
a severance agreement.
okay, and that when does that run out?
I think we're in October before it runs out.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, anybody have any other questions they'd like? Okay,
Well, thank you, Peter, for your work. on
yep,
this, too.
well,
Yeah.
Yeah.
it comes with the
that's-
territory, and I'm a numbers guy.
Well,
Don't
that's-
ask me your name after tonight. I can tell you your social security number.
Better you than me, honey.
Glad you're working on it.
Okay, yeah, let's go to review the approve orders, bills, and warrants. When I went through these, I didn't see anything that stuck out on my thing that I haven't already talked to Scott about, so I got the answer, so there's no concern on my part.
I've got
Yeah,
one.
Rick?
Yeah, the $3,000 to DiBernardo from the historicals.
Yeah, I
involves
was going to ask
historical-
about that too.
What
What
is
is that?
What was that for?
We're doing some survey work in and around the grist mill down there as part of 2 things. First of all, parts of these potential trails projects, as well as there's been some concern about where we've got a lot of trees that I've got to do some tree work down there. And I
Oh, the
think
trees, yeah.
wanted to make sure because they're shading the roof and they're creating some problems. And so we wanted to make sure that the trees are the town's responsibility, villages. So
Right,
that's,
right, okay, I was.
So
wondering-
that was
there
part of that to
talk
make
about
sure that,
Yeah,
Right.
I'm involved with the
Right,
Historical
so the-
Society.
they've
And,
asked
yeah.
us to do some tree work and we're going to do some tree work because they do need to be opened up down there.
Right,
so.
there was a big fuss and like, you know what, that tree is on the other side of the line.
Right.
That isn't our tree at all.
Right.
Yeah.
Do we bid out surveying work? How are those?
No, we beg for surveyors because surveyors are so
Hard to find.
difficult to come by. You just beg that they come.
Mhm,
They're so busy, it's absurd.
really? Huh.
Somebody was surveying by the train station today, or by the Depot Street Bridge.
They've been doing some work. I think
V-Trans?
there's 2 different projects there, so I'm not sure who was there today. V-Trans have been doing some stuff on the design, but there's also been some work from the garage project as well, because they have to do some work on that 88 Canal Street property.
Mm.
And so I think they've been doing work, and I'm not sure who was there today. I think it was the V-Trans folks today.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Now, on the warrant, I mean, I'm not questioning this at all, but just saw all these huge amounts.
Yeah.
Flood. Is that all from the July flood?
That's all from the flood.
Oh, my
and
God.
Fingers crossed that we get this disaster declaration. That's all. A lot of that is gravel,
Yeah.
contractors,
Mm.
It
road
looked like almost
restoration.
$100,000 if you
It's
had
gonna
it
be a
all.
lot more than
A
that.
lot, because I know I talked to a guy that did some work for me, that they almost literally rebuilt Leach Road,
Yes.
and they still gotta go back and put some culverts in.
Yeah, Leach Road's gonna be $500,000 or more.
Yeah. And those culverts we've talked about in prior, select board meetings, are just, the money isn't there, so we just, we did what we could with it, but, I think we're gonna get caught up before too long.
Do you think the roads going up Griswold and all that impervious area there, do you think that contributed to the flood down there?
Well, we were looking at some things, and I've got some maps and Rob was great because we used to have combined sanitary and storm up there off of Griswold Drive, and then the portion that comes down the hill then at Hyde. And there's some things up there that don't make sense to me that I've got to get an engineer to look at. We have a 15-foot pipe, and then it at that intersection where Griswold Drive turns, it goes down the hill there, and it goes into a 12-inch pipe. But then as it turns the corner, it's also a 12-inch pipe, and then it goes another 500 or 600 feet, and it goes back into a 15-inch pipe, and then it splits as it goes down the hill on the opposite
Just
end.
never go from
So
big to
none of
small,
it,
you always go to
I mean,
bigger
as you
side.
look at it, you're thinking, now what the hell would you have ever done that for?
Yeah.
Right, makes no sense.
And I'm not an engineer, so maybe that's my problem. But
I
it would
doubt
certainly
it.
make sense to me if I started in a 15-foot pipe and I'm draining a pretty large area, I'd want to keep it in a 15-inch pipe. And
Yeah.
maybe try to divert some of it
At
one way
least,
down
or maybe
Griswold
go
and
up
the
to a
other going
20-inch
down the
pipe. I
hill.
mean, it's
Yeah.
more water. as
Scott
it-
showed me the maps the other
Right.
night.
Yeah.
after
More
we got
water
done
as
with
you
that
go down
project.
the hill, my
So
God.
we're going to look
Working
into
on it.
that in a
It'll
little
come
more
to the board
detail and see if
eventually
that,
in our budget.
Oh, good.
again, keep your fingers crossed. If we get that disaster declaration, that's the kind of mitigation work that we could do that might,
Yeah.
that might help solve. You're never going to solve the problem, but it would certainly help alleviate a lot of that concern.
We can't afford too many more storms like that.
No.
My God.
No,
Well,
Well-
especially if they come back to back. I mean, like tonight, they're talking 1 or 3 inches of rain. We just fixed that road out there. and
I
all of a
know.
sudden,
I've
if
got my
that-
fingers crossed too. I
Yeah,
know.
I don't think we're gonna get it, but then again,
geez,
I've been
I
wrong
hope not.
before.
I know they had terrible storms in Baltimore, where I come from, and the tornado in Annapolis.
really.
That's
Yep,
all
rip
spin-offs
right-
from the
Rip
hurricane.
right through Annapolis. Tore up a Burger King and a
No
shopping
kidding.
mall.
I was
This
just
has been
down
a
there.
scary season.
Yeah, so I'm just very concerned that the state's really dragging its feet, taking its time on this disaster declaration, and the FEMA folks. And I know they're stretched out with other storms and other responses, but it would certainly be nice to see that declaration. Make me feel a little better.
The Leach Road culvert, was that size increased when we replaced it, presumably?
We did.
Yeah, Andy filled me in on that too.
A
Okay,
couple of
good.
different ones have been replaced, and they were both resized. One was put
I
back
think
in
there's one
place.
more I think they want to get to. That it
Correct.
just matter how soon they can get to it.
Good.
It's
Yeah,
almost
there was a
like-
couple in there that were supposed to be in the future projects, but we just didn't get to them yet.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, I need a motion to approve the orders, bills, and warrants.
I move that we approve the orders, bills, and warrants.
Wait a second.
I second that.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor would say aye.
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 All those opposed, nay.
Aye, Peter.
That's okay. You're excused. You got a distance across the room here. Coming around for signatures. Okay, review agenda items for the September 14th meeting. It says the
Yeah,
21st on
wrong
your.
date, my bad.
No, that's all right. We were both on the same wavelength.
Well, I know we had talked previously about having the listers come to do an update, and
Yeah,
I
that's
thought that
on
would
the
be
last meeting,
one
yeah.
item, and then with the update to the lease, now that the committee has at least had an opportunity to meet, I wasn't aware that you guys had already gotten together, so
Yeah, we had a good meeting.
otherwise I'd have put it on for tonight, but
Was that the
it won't
venue
matter, we
grant?
can do it in 2 weeks, so.
Talking about the venue grant?
No, this is
Just an update to the red.
the red
Oh,
town of
yeah, because I
Rockingham.
know there was supposed to be the venue grant was supposed to be on here tonight, but
Yeah.
we did touch on that anyway, of where that stood,
Right.
so.
So a couple
There
things.
were 2 to sign in here, Elijah.
A couple of things came up, Scott, in the red agreement that I was instructed to ask you about. I can do
Okay.
that. I can do that after the meeting.
Right.
Okay.
In the delinquent tax list, did you get?
I was gonna have that for the joint,
Well, that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
yep,
It just said last, at the minutes, it said
Yes.
it's supposed to be on today, but that's okay.
yep.
Anyone else have anything?
Again, I feel like I'm really thick on this, but in Westminster, we had a delinquent tax sale every year, like clockwork, boom, boom, boom. I don't know why is it so
Well,
difficult here?
back, we were doing that on like every, we had monetary value to the, from what I can gather, we had a monetary value when it hit a certain number, like 300,000 or something.
Right.
Then that was the red flag to start the tag sale process.
Yeah.
Usually it happened if they were a large delinquency, it would happen every year, but otherwise it may even go into 2. But then when Shannon was here, she wanted to do it in-house to save the money from the attorney. Well, you really don't save any money to the attorney, because once you do a tax sale, all the attorney's fees are attached to that, and it comes back unless the town buys the property, and then we have to eat the cost. So that's where your loss comes in.
All right.
But, so she wanted to do it in-house, and it just slid by everything, and it just never got down to it. Now, so now we're at where we are, we need to do something, and, Scott and I have talked about it, and
Okay.
it'll come back to us in, October, November, when we're in there, just to give the attorney, I'm not sure which one. I know we either Ancuda or Ray usually used to handle it, because they did both the village and the town, so we may just do the village. I probably ought to get their village opinion on that one.
Yeah.
They won't probably want to eat the whole bill, but, that's the case. They don't have as many delinquencies as we do, because we're a bigger entity.
So it's about $450,000 now.
462 according to the balance sheet, plus 130 grand for penalties and interest added on. So you're up to 500 and some odd thousand.
So yeah.
So, but some of those may be under agreements and stuff.
Correct.
So
Mhm.
that has to be sorted out,
Right.
and then we have to figure out whether they really blanched their agreements. If they have, then technically they're in violation, and they can go to tax sale.
All right.
So that's why I
It's a
think
little bit
Sue
of a
would mention-
process to,
Yeah,
dig
about
through
a
it.
taxes. So we're gonna give them a time between this
Yep.
boondoggle of finances, and give them
Right.
a little breathing room to come up with a tax list, so we can figure out where we are, and then we can give that list to the attorney, and they could move forward with it.
And will we, in terms of selecting the attorney, is there an advantage to choosing one over the other? Do we get a better rate? How do you make those decisions?
You can always put any professional service like that out to bid. I think there's some advantage to local knowledge and some of the folks we work with, just because it's, we know who they are, and it's
Yeah.
easy to work with them.
Masuko and Stern.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
And Kuda's a town attorney,
Right.
and I know
Right.
he does Springfield stuff, and,
Right.
their
Mhm.
towns, because he's their attorney also.
Right.
And then Ray is the village attorney for here, so,
Okay.
or the village, anyway, so. Like I say, Ray's always handled them in the past one, since I've been on the board for 12 years, so.
Good. And
But
and could
It's
this
no
be,
difference to me. It's got,
so it's Scott's call?
We'll talk to them both.
we
Yeah.
talked to him,
Yeah.
see who
Right.
wants to give us a deal.
Good.
Yeah.
And can we set it up so it happens regularly like it does in other towns after this, or not? Is that
I would prefer that once we get to this
Yeah.
point.
But that's
Yes.
something we can, there is a tax sale policy in
Correct.
the Bible I have. You guys probably don't have any of that, but because I've been on the board for so long, when
Yeah.
Terry was here, every board member that was there got this Bible.
okay?
Believe you me, it's a Bible. It has all the policies, everything in it.
Okay.
And it's, in fact, I copied a sheet off of, out of there for Scott for the fire committee thing. So he saw how that setup was back in 1990.
Oh,
So
okay.
and it goes way back a while. There's a lot of
Yep.
stuff in there.
All
So
right.
maybe I should come in and get you to copy that whole thing.
We should probably do that. Get
And
a
then,
copy
then
to
you could,
everybody on
then
the
if you
board.
wanted to hand it out, that way they'd have
Right.
something to read while they're passing the time of day in the winter.
All right. Or if there's a digital version, that would be great too.
Yeah, if he wants
Probably-
to play with the digital, I give to him. It's easier to read in
You can always-
paper, because some of them, the print is so, and some of it's handwritten, and some of
Okay.
it's.
Yeah.
All right.
So if you're trying to read it on the computer, it could
It's a
get real hairy.
hodgepodge at this point.
All right, we'll go with paper.
In fact, I got one sheet there that's a print so small that you really need a magnifying glass almost
See it?
to read it, but that's how it was done, so.
Okay.
Okay, so we go to other business, and Rick wanted to discuss his population information that I guess he coordinated with you to get it. I thought it was kind of interesting to see where the thing was,
Yeah. So if
the
you
losses were.
if you guys take a look at the Windham County graph there, you can see the ravine, and that is Rockingham. We lost 8.5% of our population in 10 years. I know there may be some accuracy issues that would push it a percent one way or the other, but it's clear that we're losing population here. And so you can see that Bonnie wrote to Jeff Nugent. If you flip your page over, you can see that Bellows Falls lost 12.7%, Saxon's River 15.2.
That surprised me.
Yeah, me too. So my neighbor and our star lister, Paul Noble, and I have had some conversations about this. He sends surveys out to everyone who buys property in Rockingham, and he's collected. And if you know Paul, he's a very curious and intellectually capable guy. So he is willing to prepare a little report for us about why people, in his estimation, his research, why people, who comes here and why, basically. What is bringing people here, and then he can also make some pretty good estimates or description about why people don't come here. And
Does he know why people leave?
Well, that's
he
my
does.
question, because the question that I wrote to Rick is that, do we know if it was a census issue? Did anybody not fill out a census? If they didn't fill out a census, they're not going to get counted. That shows up in this graph. And I never saw anybody come around or even got a questionnaire or an email.
I
from
don't
the
think they
government
did.
saying,
They-
Did you fill out your census? I mean, we did ours online, but
I did mine online.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was all, I think it was all online this year. They
And
didn't
nobody
have
came
people
around
go
and-
I don't
around.
remember
follow up,
canvassing.
so-
I don't think they did in
They-
person, did
they
they?
didn't do
I
it.
think
They
was all
didn't
on
do it.
or-
No,
They
last
came
time.
around if you didn't,
What?
Did they come in person, Sue?
sorry. They came around if you didn't fill it out online.
Okay.
see,
Okay.
So we don't know if that ever happened. So I mean,
Right.
there's a, and, if they left
Yeah.
before the census.
The other point in some of our over 10 years, I know over 10 years, Bartonsville, we had 100 people, 10 people died, spouses. Their families still live here, but those 10 are now off the census.
right.
And so that could be part of it as well. We
Yeah,
have a
that-
very old population. We have, and then others who moved into, I think in theory, if you moved into a nursing home, you're counted in your home, but maybe not in a census that was done online.
Right. It's also an issue of housing capacity. We have built 3 new houses, count them 1, 2, 3 in the past 4 years in Rockingham, according to Paul. So how we're going to attract families? We're building a lot of housing for retired older people. I don't know how much we're doing for families, and I would like to recommend to the select board that we ask Paul to prepare this report and share it with us, if you guys would be
Yeah.
up for that.
No,
Sounds really good, yeah.
Interesting to look at.
Okay, well,
Right.
he's willing to do it. I was over at his
'Cause
house this
That's
afternoon.
one of the questions I have always had. What do we have to offer people to induce them to come here?
Exactly.
And Scott and I talked about it a little bit, and we've noticed mostly that people like to inhabit the rural areas versus, the closed-in village
Density is
areas.
an issue to
They just
people.
like the
Right.
space, the open space type of thing.
Yep. And if you
And is that we don't know.
So you can't, here's the state of Vermont. I'm sorry, should have sent this to you, but the purple areas are the ones that lost significant amounts of population.
Yeah.
Mm.
And they're all the older, like Rutland, Bennington, Springfield. They're the ones that are losing the most population, and we're among that group. So there's obviously a larger dynamic that we're part of, but I would love to, us as a select board, give this some thought at some point. So it's just,
Oh, yeah,
that's my.
no, I agree with you.
All right, well, I'll then, with the consensus, I think I'm going to ask Paul to make a little presentation for us, and we can schedule it for a future meeting.
Sure.
All
That'd
right.
be great for the next meeting, I think.
Yeah.
Okay,
if
thanks.
we
He's-
gained three new houses, we've certainly lost a lot more units than that over the
Well,
past
between,
decade.
look, we got 4 or 5 in the house, in town. I mean, Birch Street, Barker Street, that house is gone. That was an apartment house. Henry Street Extension, the tree, that's been vacant for 7
Yeah.
years. There's different
That's
houses like that.
quite a
so the
number of units.
number of units, the
households
houses are
that,
there, but nobody's occupying them. I mean, no.
Well, I think the interesting thing that Paul said, and he's talked to me about it too, is the amount of new units that have been built are 1 and 2 bedrooms, and families are looking for 3+ bedrooms. So
Exactly.
those are the kinds of things that would be helpful as we're looking at, well, what kinds of strategies might we pursue? And that could be part of that discussion, right, or that focus. So I think that information would be very helpful.
That's great. Okay, well, I will pursue that then.
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
Okay, Rick, I don't have anything. Elijah, you have anything?
Well, just a question, I guess. So at the joint board meeting, we will be discussing the future of the former YMCA building, and we have a RFP out right now for demolition contractors. In the RFP, it doesn't specify what we want to do with the materials, and I realize that part of that is, that becomes the the property or whatever of the contractor. But at what point do we decide that we want to, specify that, elements of the building get salvaged? Because I feel that we should try to get as much preserved out of there as possible. And I would really like to see us investigate the possibility of saving the top of that cupola and keeping it in town as a mitigation measure of the loss of that historic building.
Interesting this.
Yeah, I don't know how you do that. If you're already asking for bids without putting that in there, it's kind of misleading to the people that may be bidding on it, that they don't know that they're gonna, I
Well,
mean,
when you-
sometimes you
when you
make a
award a
side deal
contract, you
with
can
a
always-
company and say, it's because they, and they may adjust their bid accordingly if they're gonna get rid of some of the materials or somewhere else, and rather than taking it to a landfill.
Yeah.
Right.
That may, you don't know until, like, it depends on who it is. If somebody just strictly wants to get in and take it and get rid of everything, you're kind of stuck at that point.
Yeah.
I think.
But it kind of came as a little bit of a surprise to me, when I read the RFP, that we gotten to that point that we had, locked ourselves into that. So
I spoke with Chuck about that, and he said that we can structure that deal. As Peter said and as Scott said, we can before we accept a contract, we can structure the deal. I agree that some of those big old beautiful timbers, probably made of chestnut, 1835, the building was built.
Yep.
Those have real value, and I wouldn't want that to just disappear into the contractor's ownership
The
without.
other thing is the slate that's up there. My God, that slate's got to be something worth some money. But who's going to be
Who's
the
gonna
fool
take-
that's going
taking
to
it out?
on that roof?
Exactly.
Take it off piece by piece. It
Right.
ain't going to be me.
Yeah.
The way that
But,
roof is.
it's obviously it's a huge loss to the community, to lose that building. I realize, why it has to happen, but I just want to try to mitigate the loss as much as possible, and lessen the impact, through how we see those materials disposed of and what elements we retain for ourselves.
What would you do with the cupola?
I would just install it as a structure, sitting on the ground. When we can discuss, at length, where to site that at, whether it, it depends on what becomes of that property, whether it stays on that property or whether we move it to another town parcel. For example, at the Waypoint Center, where there is actually a site where there was a building that had been taken down. So something that I think that we should seriously investigate.
That would be interesting. I mean, put it where that little house was that they tore down.
The old stage building, yeah.
That would be interesting there.
Elijah,
Uh,
could you look at
historical
other
plaque.
towns that might have done this? Can you go online and see what other towns have done with and give us some
Yeah.
idea about how it might work?
Well, it's extremely common to save the cupola off the top of a building because it's such a architecturally distinctive piece, and it's the the easiest thing that you can pull off of that that can be a freestanding structure. So it's done all the time.
Yep.
So it would just be one piece of mitigation of the loss of a very important structure.
Okay, well, we can look at that if we get any bids for the demo at that point because they got to come to the board to accept them. So at that point, we could discuss that and hack it around and see where we go.
Yeah.
Bonnie, have anything?
Nope.
Okay, nothing else gone? There's no executive session, so I'll throw out a motion for adjournment.
I've moved that we adjourn.
I second that motion.
Motion's made and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor would say aye.
I
Aye.
Aye.